What we really do is we try to solve one problem, and that problem is division and disunity in the workplace. And there are lots of different things that cause those things, that bring that to a head at times. And we really, our organization, we try to be laser focused on try to rid the organizations of that. And really what we want to do is we want to help move team members to help them become teammates in organizations. And we do that really by talking about four main topics. The first one is communication and culture, and we're going to spend a lot of time on that one today. The second one is execution and teamwork. The third one is leadership and supervision. And then the fourth one is personal development and growth. And that's really what we do. Every problem that we try to solve, every question we try to answer, we try to come at it from one of those four topics. And we do sessions in organizations with people. We do sessions online. We're doing some video sessions as well. Lots of different ways to get connected. And I just wanted to tell you up front, that's what we're doing. And so over the next several minutes, that's what we're going to be talking about. I do want to invite you at any point to send us a question. You can text us at any time. The number is 580-952-9229. You can send us a text at any point. We'd love to hear from you, especially we're going to take some questions a little bit later on, and we're going to have lots of videos that are going to follow that are essentially just going to be question and answers. So we'd love to hear from you on that. What we do is we break every organization down into three different parts. Live, which is you doing the job that you're paid to do. The locker room, which is the way that we treat each other all the time. And then the lab. And the lab is where we go to get feedback and we go to get training and coaching. So whenever I go into an organization that we're partnering with, we get the leadership team together and I ask them one question. What are 5 things you guys are really good at? And a lot of times, people are not quick to brag on themselves. So whenever we start talking about that, it takes a little while to get going sometimes. And then I lean in and I say, of those 5 things, what's the one thing that you're the best at? And we'll get that, we'll circle it. And then we'll make it like another list, just kind of a sub list. Okay, so what makes your organization great at that one thing? What makes your team great at that one thing? And then we'll kind of bring that out and have something to go on for us really to put in our playbook. And then I smile and I take a drink of water and I say, I ask you what are 5 things you're really good at? What do you think my next question is? It's really, what are 2 areas we need to improve? And every single time I ask that question, one answer comes back every single time. The answer is communication. And the other answer is a branch on the tree of communication nearly every single time. That's not surprising because organizations are made up of humans, and humans, sometimes we are not good at communicating because we want people to be mind readers. This works in the classroom. It also works at home in the living room. Like, we want to try to have these conversations. We want to try to be able to communicate in ways that make sense, but a lot of times we don't want to have a hard conversation or what might turn into a slippery conversation. So instead, we just kind of lean back. And this happens in the workplace over and over and over again. And so one of the things that we really want to do is just try to hone in on that today. So we're going to talk about communication and culture in this video. Before we go any further, I'd love for you to like this video. Just give it a thumbs up. And then I'd love for you to answer this question in the comments. What do you think the other branch on the tree of communication would be for your organization? I said in every organization we partner with, there are 2 things we need to improve on. And one of those answers is always communication. And the other one is a branch on the tree of communication. So my question to you is, what do you think the other branch on the tree of communication is for your organization? Just type that in the comments below. We'd love to hear that. So what's the deal with the communication? Before we can really break that down, we really need to define that and get some common ground about communication. And communication is simply just transferring information. It can be done in so many different ways, but before we talk about the different ways it can be done, we really need to put it in 2 buckets, internal and external. You've got your internal communication, which is within your specific team that you work with, and then it's in that specific department. It's kind of like you throw the rock in the water and you get the concentric circles. You've got several different layers of this on the internal communication. And it starts with you and your team, your immediate team, and then it goes out to everyone in your department. And then it goes out into the interdepartmental communication. So the sales team and how they're communicating with the customer service team, or the team that's making the parts and the team that's doing the shipping, or the team that's prepping the food and the team that's delivering the food and serving the food. All of those different things, internal communication is not just one layer, it's multi-layered. But on the external side of communication, then it's about your existing customers and clients. It's about potential new customers and clients. And it's about like how we're watching it right now on social media, and about how everyone perceives you. The communication we have outside of our organization, whether it's online, in person, however that looks, that's something we really need to be mindful of. The last thing I want to say about the internal communication, jumping back to that side, is the most important internal communication that you have is within yourself. The communication you have in between your ears, with your mind, with yourself, that is vital. And the truth is, you and I are not that different. And we're also not that different from some of the students that we go and see and serve. When you look in the mirror, you don't see your highlight reel. You see ways maybe where you messed up or you let somebody down. Or maybe you just didn't let somebody down technically, but you just didn't do the thing as well as you wanted to do it. And that's when the person who knows you better than anyone speaks your language and sounds a lot like you. So we've got to really be aware of and mindful of the communication that we have with ourselves. Now, we have several different types of communication. Of course, there's writing, and we've got verbal communication, and then there's texting and email, and the nonverbal communication, how's your day? How are you doing? Angry eyebrow, finger in your face. Like, there's a whole lot of that we're saying without saying the words. And we've got to be aware to read the body language of the people that we're around. That's why face-to-face communication is still one of the best ways to be able to communicate with people. We know that in some cases, communication can even be 80 to 90% nonverbal, which is why there can be lots of misunderstanding when we send texts or send emails all the time. That's a huge thing. So I'm not saying we shouldn't do texts or emails or shouldn't do Slack or shouldn't use some of those apps. They're built for convenience and to try to get us connected. What I am saying, we've got to be aware that every single organization that we partner with and have partnered with, from the schools to the churches, to the businesses, the insurance companies, the restaurants, the city offices, the precision manufacturing companies, the gymnastics coaches, every organization said the thing we need to work on the most, one of the top two things, is communication. And so don't sacrifice clarity for convenience. I'm just going to set a group me and then send all the messages out to everybody. Well, not everybody gets it that same way. We'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a minute. There are also some different styles of communication. We got the different types, and there's some different styles of communication. And one of them is passive communication, and then there's aggressive communication, and then number 3 is passive aggressive communication. It's like where you've got the person who's the king or the queen of the backhanded compliment. They're not really saying what they want to say. They're just kind of talking. Maybe they're beating around the bush a little bit. Maybe they're saying stuff, trying to not intentionally offend you. That's one that I know very well. I speak that language fluently. And so with my heightened awareness in my own communication, I've really made some good strides in that. And I know that you can do the same thing. And then the 4th different style of communication is assertive communication. So we have these gaps in communication, and whether they're intentional or unintentional, I don't think anybody intentionally leaves gaps in the communication. And if you do, please don't admit to that. Like, that's not going to help you win friends and influence people. But we all experience gaps in communication, whether we're the person receiving the communication or we're the communicator. There's this great quote by author and speaker John Gordon. And he says, where there is a gap or a void in communication, negativity fills it. I'm going to say that one more time for the people in the back. Where there is a gap or a void in communication, negativity fills it. When I bring this up in our sessions, I just intentionally, I get my bottle of water and I take a little drink just because I want to watch everybody's face as that rings out. And you know what, not everybody, but most of the people, they're like, man, that's really true. especially when they look at it as the person who is the one being communicated with. They don't feel like, a lot of times we don't feel like we have enough communication. We don't feel like we have enough information, like we're on a need-to-know basis, and whoever decided you're on the need-to-know basis decided that I don't need to know just yet, right? And when that happens, when for any reason we don't get the information that we need, where we experience a gap in the communication, most of the time, negativity does fill it. But I want to invite you to the other side of the table for a second. Now, instead of you being the one receiving the information, if it's true, where there's a gap in communication, negativity fills it. If that's true, then when you step on the other side of the table and you're now the one who's doing the communicating, we've got to keep that in mind. Not is there a gap from what I wanted to say and what I meant, but is there a gap in what I'm actually asking them to do? If I were receiving this communication for the first time, would I understand what it means? What I find almost every time when we're working with organizations about their communication, most of the time you can go back to the very beginning and trace the miscommunication back to setting expectations. A lot of times we don't set expectations clearly and we don't set expectations completely. We just get the information that we think is important. Jim Collins in Good to Great, he calls it the big rocks, right? We put the big rocks together and send those out, and we know these are responsible humans, and they're innovative and they're creative and they're team players, and so they're going to try to find a right solution, which is not bad, but we got to be careful with that because we leave a lot to be desired or a lot to be inferred. So again, I want to invite you to like this video, and not only like the video, but I'd also like for you to leave an answer in the comments. What I'd like for you to answer is this question. On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, how well do you think your organization does in setting and managing expectations? So 1 to 5, 1 is not good, 5 is the best, 5 is great. How do you think your organization does in setting and then managing the expectations? Expectations unset go unmet. I would love to give credit to someone whoever said that. I heard it on a podcast and I don't know who it was, but man, it's so true. And it just takes a little bit of extra time for us to make sure the expectations we're setting are clear. Because if the expectations are unset, they will go unmet. And that's going to lead to a huge whole other set of circumstances. So we've been talking about communication. Now we're going to transition over and talk about culture. Culture is very simply the way we do what we do or the way we allow it to be done. We can come at it from all different kinds of ways, but that is what culture means. And Peter Drucker had a fantastic quote about culture. You may be familiar with it. He says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And every time I hear that, on the inside, I'm like, uh-huh. Because we don't wonder, should we have a good plan? Should we have a good strategy? We know we have a good plan and a good strategy. But we think that just because we got it written down on paper in bullet points, and this is our plan, or these are our procedures, or this is our strategy, or how we're going to move forward, we got our mission statement and our core values, which is great. But if we don't pay attention to the culture, the way we do what we do, and the way we allow it to be done, none of that's even going to matter, because culture is such a big part of it. Yes, communication is a big part. Culture is a gigantic part of it. And I guess that would be one of my questions is, what do you think really is impactful in culture? One of the great things about culture is organizations move at the speed of trust. And so whatever your culture is, if it's not a culture that fosters trust, that gives lots of opportunity for people to gain trust, then that's going to be really, really difficult because we're not going to move forward. We're not going to move together. You might have a whole bunch of individual heroes and folks who are great at their job, rock stars, we call them a lot. You might have a whole bunch of those rock stars, but if they're not playing the same song at the same time, together, in the same key, at the same tempo, we're not going anywhere. So for us, yes, as leaders, but even if you're not the head leader of the organization or of your department even, that's still a huge thing that we've got to keep in mind. And again, what is good in the classroom or in the conference room, it also overlays at home into the living room. What kind of culture do you have at home? What kind of culture does your family have? And organizations, even families, move at the speed of trust. And where there is a breach of trust or a lack of trust, man, things start to move very slowly. But that's not news to you, because regardless of who you are, universally, most people don't like change. Sometimes they're okay with it. Maybe a lot of times they're more okay with it now since the pandemic has come, and now we're not getting to do everything exactly the way we used to do it once upon a time. But if you poll a group of people if you poll people in your department, in the customer service department, you poll people in the shipping department, you poll people in the quoting, whatever it is. If you poll those people in those departments and you ask them, hey, are you guys looking forward to change? They might say, yes, I want change, because we want the change to be better. But the deal is, we want the change that we want when we want it. Most people, if they don't get to dictate the change, most people don't love the change. One way most people deal with something they don't like, and this is where it's so impactful in the culture, when people experience something they don't like, most of the time they don't just keep it to themselves. They talk about it, but rarely do they talk about it to someone who can do something about it. They go and talk about it to somebody else, whether it's the water cooler talk or whether it's out in the parking lot before or after work. Like you don't have to go very far to find someone who's upset about something at work, at any work. And the issue is, if we're not, now we're back to communication. If we don't have this culture of communication, where when something doesn't seem quite right, it doesn't feel quite right, where we can talk about it and have an open conversation and even some healthy conflict. If we don't have that, then it's just going to be a dictatorship that moves as one person, or as the powers that be, whoever those are, as they can win. A lot of times there are power struggles within organizations, and I understand that. One of the things that we've got to do, especially in the area of culture and communication, is we've got to keep gossip to a minimum. We just have to. And so remember, we break every organization down into 3 different categories. Live, which is you doing the job you're paid to do. And then the third one is the lab, which is you getting coaching, you getting training, getting feedback. And the one in the middle is the locker room. And my job, our team's job, is to keep the organization from becoming toxic. And the quickest way for any organization to become toxic is to be a high traffic gossip organization. So I'm kind of painting not really a doom and gloom picture here, but I'm trying to remove some of the blind spots from where your normal day might be taking you. And I think one of the first things we've got to do, an action step, one of the first things we've got to do in the areas of communication, it's 2 steps. Be clear, be consistent. Be clear, be consistent. In the classroom, in the conference room, also at home in the living room, we're going to teach the kids to do the chores. Let's be clear and let's be consistent. Trash day is at our house, it comes twice a week. Let's be clear what the job is and be consistent. This is what we do. Be clear and be consistent. If we will focus our energy as leaders on being clear and being consistent about what we're trying to do, that's going to really set the expectations well, and it's going to set the table for everyone to be on the same page with the communication. And the other thing it's going to do, if people know they can trust you all the time because you're consistent, then it's also going to foster this trust relationship, to where if I'm trying to communicate to you but you don't understand, you may not say, hey, I don't understand, can you help me out? You won't, especially if you don't trust me. What you'll do is you'll wait till the meeting's over or the training's over, and then I go and do whatever I'm going to do, and you lean over and you're like, oh, what's he talking about? You have any idea what he's saying? That's incredibly typical. So if I had a whole hour or a whole day to talk to you about one topic, it would be about bitterness. And you're like, well, what are we talking about bitterness for? Listen, because bitterness doesn't come off the shelf as bitterness. It never has. It doesn't start as bitterness. It starts as unmet expectation. And then that unmet expectation is either unaddressed or underaddressed. Pause. That's unaddressed or underaddressed based on what? based on everyone's perspective who's sitting around the table or who's in the locker room at any point, no matter what the organization is. Everyone who works here has a different perspective on if the leader or the boss or the team lead, if they address the issue at all or well enough. So bitterness doesn't come off the shelf as bitterness. It starts as unmet expectation. And then that unmet expectation is either unaddressed or underaddressed. And that causes frustration because there is not the solution or the resolution that we want. And then that frustration, just resentment grows. And then it just ferments. And eventually we get down to apathy, which we think, oh, finally, we're at apathy. That's got to be where it ends, but it's really not. I had the honor of hearing Dr. Bernice King speak in front of 7,000 people a couple of years ago. And she leaned in, and her dad was the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And she leaned into this room with people from dozens of countries. And she said, hate didn't kill my father. Indifference did. And apathy and indifference, those two are so closely intertwined. Once we get to bitterness, that's not the bottom. You can go past bitterness to apathy. And then it's like, hey, sorry, not sorry. I don't care. And you can see it in their face a lot of times. And I would much rather have someone who I've got some conflict that we're working together because we have the relationship to be able to work through it, than have someone who's just done. I mean, they're done. And they have apathy. That's no way for us to move forward as an organization. And so if we were going to have a whole workshop, maybe coming soon, a whole workshop about one topic, bitterness might be the thing because it has the potential. It's so sneaky. It doesn't come off the shelf as bitterness. We don't know to avoid it because it doesn't have a neon flashing light saying bitterness ahead. But it can be one thing that just erodes trust over time. And then when I get bitter and I'm over here in my corner of the world doing my job, and then I see someone else who does something that they shouldn't get away with, but they do, I don't even think about the extenuating circumstances. I don't think about what might be going on at home. I just see they did something that I got reprimanded for, got in trouble for, or was told was unacceptable, but now they're getting to do it. And then my resentment, my bitterness grows. Not because I'm Mike, but because I'm a human. And that's how we work. So we've got to really not only be aware of what it is, but then what we can do to try to keep it from spreading. So, turning the corner. What I'd like for you to do, listen, bitterness is heavy, man, and it's got some ripples that go out from it. But that's okay. That's what we're here for. We're here for the real conversation, for the honest conversation. So again, what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to like this video, and then I'd love for you to leave an answer to this question in the comments below. How big of a role do you think bitterness plays in communication at your workplace? Now, I didn't say how big of a role does bitterness play in your communication. Don't hear me say something I didn't say. One more time, the question, how big of a role do you think bitterness plays in communication in general in your workplace?